Good evening, New Year, and welcome to another Stompy 51 miniature adventure. Today I'm going to take you through the various miniatures I'm using for Mantic's Deadzone Rebel faction, and it basically ends up turning into a bit of an unboxing of the fantastic Stargrave Crew number 2, which are basically an all-women plastic 28mm crew. If you're watching this, I'm sure you know, but basically Deadzone is Mantic Games' much better version, in my humble opinion, of Games Workshop's Kill Team, and it's a genuinely three-dimensional game where there's no measuring sticks, they've got cubes, and it's a great fun exploding dice mechanic that just gives hours of fun. There are various factions. One of them is the Rebellion, and I'm sure I remember hearing on some podcast or something that the guy in Mantic Games was like, cough, yes, obviously they are the same as the Rebellion in Star Wars, with a load of very similar motifs. Now, in Deadzone, in the lore, as far as I recollect, the galaxy, whatever, is controlled by an evil corporation. I'm sure this has nothing to do with Ronnie Renton's history in Games Workshop and his feelings about his former employer now that he's got his own gaming company. But basically, the Rebs have set up a rebellion against this evil corporation and its constant propaganda videos. Mantic Games' own miniatures are obviously fantastic, but being the kind of hobbyist I am, the reality is you can use whatever miniatures you want for so many of the different troop types. Starting off with the humble but numerous Rebel Troopers, they come with nothing more fancy than a rifle with rapid fire and not much ability to actually shoot it, with range 5+ on a D8. Fighting wouldn't bother, 6+ on a D8. Save, good luck, 6+. 2 hit points is standard, size 1 standard, and only 1 victory point though, so you just flood the pitch. Now the role of the Rebel Troopers is going to be played by these Stargrave Crew II figures, which I recently assembled, and they are all women. But they look very much kind of Star Wars Rebellion. And here they are assembled. I mean, how futuristic do they look? Some of these weapons look like they could be from now, but obviously some look a bit more kind of las gunny. And here's quite a chunky Mark Copplestone figure from his Future Wars range. And I mean, he's quite tall even within that range, but I suppose he's entirely in keeping. And his role, I suppose, will be just to grunt. I did think of making him the Rebel Cell leader just because he looks different, and then I recognised, in keeping with the times, that wouldn't really be appropriate if these were the Rebel Troopers. And so I fished around and I realised I had just the perfect miniature to be the human cell leader, which is this Kev White sculpt. And Kev White, you'll remember, has his own figure sculpting company called Hassle-Free Miniatures, but just last year moved back to Games Workshop as a sculptor for Forge World, I think having been a painter for them about 30 years ago. But anyway. And there she is holding her cigar, which, generally in miniatures kind of shows leadership, or at least character. And she's got a weapon that is plausibly a rifle in the future and looks quite souped up with this sort of scope. And then I just grabbed some further bits of the Stargrave Crew number 2 frame. A little bit of a walkie-talkie. I mean, in the future we assume they don't need these things, but why not? And a kind of set of equipment over there, which she's carrying on her lower back, attached to her belt. I couldn't put it further up because she hasn't got any straps, so it wouldn't really be plausible. And this is how she compares size-wise to the others. So not that much shorter, actually, even though I have a feeling that she was designed as some kind of like halfling creature. But, you know, size-wise, she doesn't look too far off the others. And, you know, some people, cough, like me, are just that little bit shorter. But in any case, her main role in life is not to be a barnstorming, close combat specialist behemoth, but instead to be the brains of the operation, with Tactician 2 to give an extra couple of tactical dice, and this jack of all trades skill, allowing her to let members of her team kind of swap their abilities around, their stats around, to find the best one for the particular task at hand. And this is how they scale up against some of the larger figures that are going to be in this crew, which, you know, again, is, to my mind, entirely in keeping. And as we're on the subject, we might as well do a bit of a quick look at the sprue that comes with the Stargrave 2 miniatures. So I suppose that makes this a bit of an unboxing, so you're getting good value for watching. How do we do that inside? So we've got some loads of nice heads over here. Let's get some, make sure this is in focus. So these are the kind of futuristic looking heads, largely human, but not all. You get 4 bodies per sprue. 5 bodies per sprue, but I've clipped one off there. Now, one tip I would share is they have little numbers next to each arm for each left arm and each right arm, and they give you a number for what correlates with each other. Don't do what I did in the beginning, just plonk on whatever arms you want and think you'll just work it out. It's actually too fiddly. Stick to what they've told you. Get a load of backpacks. I mean, I would say, I think there are enough weapons for all of them to have assault rifle type weapons or close combat kind of pistol type weapons. There's a few kind of engineering bits and pieces they can hold. But the real value, I thought, was in the heads. It's always in the heads. And so these are the wholly human, you know, some a bit more militaristic. That's the kind of like pilot Russian tanker kind of helmet. Then kind of largely normal, except that she looks a bit more like a zombie. And then there's some more kind of, there's a few kind of Reb kind of looking Mississippi militia kind of looking heads, but then there are a few kind of alien heads. Let's turn now to the Rebel weapons team, which really bring a sledgehammer to any game with a range 10, armor piercing 4 missile launcher for a humble 17 points. And for that, I've actually had reams of fun mashing together various things. So my Rebel weapons team is going to be this Igor Karpov little alien, which is the same species as these. And so he's kind of like a Wookiee, I suppose, being given orders by this lady from the Stargrave II crew, holding her kind of set of data codes in there and pointing and saying what they should be blasting, and with her little eyepiece or optical monocle or whatever it's called, so she can kind of see a couple of miles ahead. And, you know, they've laid their rifle down. This keeps breaking off, but I'll find a better way of sticking it. They keep laying their rifle down. It must be his rifle, so they can get on with the main job at hand, which is to fire this missile launcher, because strangely they've only got access to one kind of weapon, whereas most weapons teams in Deadzone seem to have access to multiple ones, you know, a bit of a cannon, a laser. These guys just get a missile launcher. I suppose it's all the West would send them in terms of HIMARS equipment, but that's the way of the world. And this is a kind of metal base to the weapon, which came from, I can't remember what it's called, Void. Really, really, really old. And then I had this resin missile launcher, and I just plonked that on top of it. So these are not actually the same original thing. And you can kind of tell that, because conceptually, you know, how would this be transported without it being kind of lifted onto some kind of truck? And then, because war is a terrible thing, this is from a zombie sprue, one of the Games Workshop, I think the corpse card. And I had this kind of Germanic looking futuristic space helmet, not from Victoria Miniatures, I can't remember the name. It'll come to me. Okay, it came to me. Anvil Industry. That's where the helmet's from, and actually, that's where the top part of the missile launcher is from as well. And I plunked that down there, you know, because they're obviously fighting these guys and they've rushed up in quick advance and are now firing further back at enemy supply depots. And then they will shoot and scoot, because presumably they've got a truck somewhere around the corner to go pick this up. Or maybe it's lighter than it looks in the future, who knows. I'll also be interested in people's thoughts. Whenever I put rocks down, sometimes I pile them up, but actually, in nature, you never see rocks on top of each other, do you? Or do you? Let me know and I may just rip that one off. Or maybe they just moved it out of the way so that they could get on with firing their missile launcher. But what this does add is some quite useful armor piercing, because it's armor piercing 4, so they can manage not to get shot. They can put a big hole into a Strider, or well, there are no vehicles, I think, in Deadzone, but, you know, all those big kind of power walkers that the various factions have. And if you're talking sniper, what screams out sniper more than two weird Mandalorian type looking, when I say Mandalorian, I mean, like, you know, the series as opposed to the actual Mandalorian character, but these Mandalorian looking, Star Wars looking desert space nomad creatures. I mean, I wondered if they looked more kind of, you know, Victorian Mars, but actually, no, I think they look more Star Warsy, and I think we're talking gold helmets, probably, you know, well, brass kind of coloured helmets and brass coloured weaponry. And then loads of different coloured buttons to show that this is the future. And then I might just use one of the GW contrast paint browns just to keep these simple and give them a bit of a dry brush. And these snipers, not that fast, you know, basic standard human speed, not that great at fighting, actually not that great at shooting, but I suppose they do have sniper scope. But they're not that expensive, they're 15 points versus, you know, whatever it is, 8 to 10 points for an average Gump. Annoyingly, they are specialists though, so again, they do require you to have an equivalent base Gump in order to take them as well. And this is how they scale with the base Gumps. I mean, they are slightly Wookiee-like in height, because they are quite tall. But they will be a pleasure to paint. Oh yes, I may have forgotten to say where they're from. I mean, they're sculpted by Igor Karpov, a very talented Russian sculptor. Now, I always talk about concepts that I've sort of thought about, but I don't think ultimately work. You've got these Rebel Indige, which basically to me sounded like they were, you know, halfling snipers. And although they have like a little tail and everything, they're basically little people who are agile, a bit crazed, and also have scout, and they're 10 points versus the average rebel trooper of 7 points. And they just got a normal rifle. And I wondered if these trollkin, I forgot what they were called, like little baby troll bloods or whatever they were called, if they could function as that. but I don't know if they look a bit, they've got like, well, admittedly they've got proper looking rifles, but they've got kind of wooden butts and loads of like random bits of food stuck to their back. So I don't know if they look sufficiently spacey. But then again, these guys again could be as steampunky or war machiney as futuristic. So maybe they do work okay. And let's have a look at some of the other ones. I'd welcome thoughts on whether you think that they kind of could function as indige. And I just know that the people I play with will really welcome having one miniature who's lying flat and can't be seen, albeit what they tend to say in those circumstances quite rightly is, well, yes, it's fine, we can't see him, but he can't see anything that he's behind because he's lying down. Or we just agree conceptually that he is a miniature that's the same height as the others. So again, answers on a postcard, please.
But now we come on to the pièce de résistance. Who doesn't need a dinosaur when they're at home with the Rebel Teraton, who really are a close combat behemoth with Fight 4, close combat armor-piercing 1, and a few little tricks which don't amount to much but are good fun, being a grenade launcher with range 3, 1 use, and a hand flamer, range 2, also 1 use. But the ability mainly to teleport in a few spaces, which always comes as a bit of a shock to your opponent.
And for that, I came across these fantastic futuristic dinosaurs on my mini factory, which I suppose is slightly ironic. They do look very kind of Guardians of the Galaxy. I mean, to have a dinosaur pumping out little grenades and wearing goggles is just hilarious. And I don't know, I can't remember what I'm thinking of, but it reminds me of 1990s cartoons.
Crikey, I'm older than I realised. I'm talking about the Dino Riders from 1988. Unsurprisingly, though, the powerful storyline has remained with me after all these years. Pursued by intergalactic warlord Krulos and his Rulons, the human Valorians, the goodies, fly through a wormhole and end up on prehistoric Earth. The baddie follows them, and they all become stuck in prehistory as well, both building dinosaur armies who blow each other to pieces. Ah, the joys of my youth.
And so the rules make provision for the Rebel Teraton, who unfortunately is a specialist. I've got so many specialists, but I think I've got just enough Rebel grunts to kind of justify, because I think you've got to have no more than one specialist per grunt. So anyway, so the average Rebel Teraton carries ceremonial blades, and I thought, that just equates to some kind of heavy weapon, because the ceremonial blades are armor-piercing 1, and, these power fists are clearly armor-piercing 1, and I mean, who wants to be hit on the head with a wrench? Then they've got grenade launchers and hand flamers. Now, I'm not sure where the hand flamer actually would be, but I don't know, maybe they breathe fire. Maybe they're fire lizards. And this is how they scale up with your average 28mm human. And they're on 40mm bases.
Oh yeah, and I should have said these Triceratops were 3D sculpted by Treadhead Rad, and you can get all his stuff on my mini factory. Seems reasonably obvious to me that as a kid he was an aficionado of the Dino Riders as well.
And I don't know how well you can see it, because unfortunately it is painted black, but this model screamed out to me Grogan, and I wouldn't be surprised if there was some kind of inspiration going on between the two.
The dude on the right is a Grogan, according to Mantic's Deadzone.
So this is from Hordes / War Machine, and it's one of the warcasters from the Trollkin faction, who are basically kind of blue orcs, as far as I could tell conceptually. And I once had
of a small army which I bought when Warmer Hordes was still something, and which I assembled but never played with. But I always found the metal really fiddly to kind of bring together. But when I flogged them all on eBay, I just knew that this was worth keeping. And even though it's supposed to be a steampunk era miniature, I mean, if a Grogan is supposed to be carrying an onslaught cannon with range 5 and suppression weight of fire, which basically just goes, but you'd enjoy those sound effects, or he's supposed to be carrying a desolator, which is range 8, i.e. the whole board in Deadzone with armor piercing 3, I thought that this weapon must scream that out. And, you know, I think he's sufficiently futuristic looking. And actually, if you think about it, as with so much in War Machine, I mean, it's almost more futuristic than steampunk. And scale-wise, this is how he's comparing to the standard grunts he'll be walking around with, which I think is about right. I mean, I think he's supposed to be on a 25mm base, but no one is going to object, methinks.
I think we'll leave it there for today. Thank you very much for watching to the end. I hope to see you around soon. Please like, offer any thoughts and comments down below, and subscribe if you want to see more. Now that I've got Xenos Rampant, the scope for using all manner of sci-fi miniatures has now just leapt out of Pandora's box. Keep safe.